In part 1 of the HESHAN de Silva's con story, we walked you through his fast rise to fame as Kenya's youngest billionaire, from his appearance on the Young Rich show on K24 in September of 2013, to his working relationship with Glasshouse Public Relations Limited, the firm that would later cut ties with him and publicly question his credibility. We also unpacked the small lies and half-truths that were peppered into HESHAN's story from the very beginning. Welcome to Masters of Illusions, Act 1 of the Coronation series. In Part 2 of the HESHAN de Silva's con story, we turn to the bigger lies he told, allegations that he defrauded an individual of thousands of dollars, claims of possible money laundering activities, and how he handled his fall from grace. Now on to the big lies he told, the meat and potatoes of his entire facade. Remember we mentioned earlier that in HESHAN's Young Rich interview, he claims to have had a random encounter with a New York-based hedge fund manager at the Masai Mara.
I was in Masai Mara and I saw this couple who was sitting around a fire, and I just decided to speak to them. I think my mother insisted that I do because they looked quite lonely. And the guy runs a hedge fund in New York, and I think it's around $17 billion. And we just started talking, and we were pitching around ideas, and we decided, hey, why don't we try and change the massive poverty that is happening in Kenya? And it's crazy for one fund to think that you can do that, but when you're sitting behind a couple of partners who are well into the billions of dollars, some of these things seem a bit more realistic. So we went full on, and we decided to do something that no fund on earth has ever tried before, and that's investing purely in what's in your head.
Listening to his account, there are red flags that makes the story hard to believe. For example, hedge funds mostly focus on maximizing financial returns for their investors, while some engage in impact investing or corporate social responsibility initiatives. They do not casually just invest in ideas in people's heads. They typically focus on assets that can generate measurable returns, such as stocks, bonds, commodities, derivatives, etc. Noticeably, he does not mention the hedge fund manager's name or the company he owns or works for. Our money is on the fact that this story that HESHAN told was not true. Perhaps the biggest lies HESHAN told were about how he made his money. He shared two different stories about the origins of his wealth. The first was debunked by journalist Larry Madowo, and after speaking to a credible source, we can now authoritatively debunk the second story he told. HESHAN told the first story about how he made his money to Larry, and Larry detailed this story in the article we mentioned earlier, titled "Boy Billionaire HESHAN Lacks de Silva." Okay, now I'm confused. In this article, Larry notes HESHAN first reached out to him on social media with his story, and the two even met, and Larry interviewed him. HESHAN claimed he had made a fortune after selling Africa's largest tea processing factory to Unilever for more than 2.4 billion Kenyan shillings. This happened in 2013, even before HESHAN appeared on the Young Rich show. In the article, Larry explains that he emailed HESHAN on 2nd August 2013 requesting verifiable proof of his wealth, anything from documents on the alleged Unilever buyout to basic evidence of the transaction. The response he received was that HESHAN had discussed the matter at length with Unilever and had been advised not to make any public announcement until Unilever released its own statement on the acquisition in the last quarter of 2013. The Unilever announcement never came. Larry also noted that he could not find any independent proof of Unilever business dealings with HESHAN. In short, HESHAN did not make his money from selling a tea processing factory to Unilever. That deal never happened. HESHAN started sharing the second narrative of how he made his money when he was first featured on Young Rich. And he would go on to share this story in other interviews. Remember, this is the story where HESHAN claims to have made his money after an insurance selling startup he was part of made 120 million Kenyan shillings in its first year of operation, all because of him.
First million. My first million came from a insurance thing. Some guys had come up to me and I had my 10,000 shillings. At the time, that's what I was willing to spend on business, and growing my groups. I had my 10,000 shillings and I had these 3 guys from Dandora who came up to me and said, hey, why don't we try this? Selling insurance to every person rather than it being available to an elite few. So we came up with packages ranging from 5 shillings all the way up to 100 shillings, basically enabling you to have insurance when you travel out of Nairobi or into Nairobi and throughout the region as well. And then I took that to a large insurance company here in Nairobi, and they really liked it. And very quickly after that, we partnered up with a mobile phone company, and we were able to sell insurance via your phone. And because it was 5 bob upwards, the turnover was very high. Within our first year, we were projected at 120 million shillings, and that is what enabled us to go full speed into investing in ideas rather than focusing on normal businesses ourselves.
The thing about this insurance narrative, it's vague, there are glaring gaps, and there are inconsistencies. To be more specific, for example, when it comes to the numbers he shared, the math does not math at all. He claims his startup sold insurance worth between 5 Kenyan shillings and 100 Kenyan shillings per unit and generated 120 million Kenyan shillings in its first year of operation. To reach 120 million Kenyan shillings at the low end of selling each insurance policy at 5 Kenyan shillings, they would need to sell 24 million policies in 1 year. That is about 65,000 policies processed in a day, every single day, 7 days a week. Even at the high end, assuming they sell each insurance unit for 100 Kenyan shillings, that's 1.2 million policies in 1 year, or roughly 3,300 policies per day. Still extremely high for a small startup just starting out. Additionally, processing, underwriting, and managing claims for millions of tiny insurance policies would require significant infrastructure. Something a small startup almost certainly wouldn't have in its first year of operations. Since HESHAN's story did not pass the smell test, we were determined to debunk it. You see, in the interviews he gave, he did not mention the name of this insurance startup, but in one of the print interviews he gave to Tech Moran in May of 2014, he says the insurance startup was called Safiri Sure. For context, Safiri Sure is the flagship product of Motisure, an existing insurtech startup based in Kenya, and it provides a platform for digital payments and affordable trip-based micro-insurance for public transport passengers and operators. They do amazing things, check them out. We were determined to establish if HESHAN had anything to do with Motisure or their product Safiri Sure. In November of 2025, we reached out to a source who has been with Motisure from the very beginning. We promised them anonymity, so we cannot reveal their identity, but here's what they said in part with regards to HESHAN De Silva. I do not know who the individual is. Safiri Sure is a product of Motisure, locally developed by ourselves. He has not invested in us, nor have we ever heard of him or his company before. To be honest, getting this answer was not surprising. It was just bizarre how easily and boldly HESHAN lied. He lied with his chest. Additionally, it seems to be HESHAN's MO to steal the thunder from Kenyan ventures, bask in the glow of their success, and claim involvement in their businesses, likely as a way to make himself seem more credible. In fact, the founder of Twiga Foods, reportedly took to Twitter in 2015, alleging that HESHAN tried to pass off Trigger Foods as his own company. There is also something else with this insurance story he tells that we need to name. The way HESHAN tells the story of being the person behind Safirishua's success positions him as a savior.
Applied for jobs from the lowest all the way to the highest job, and then nobody called you.
Yeah, absolutely no one.
So what did you do from that point?
Well, I was volunteering at this home in on the Athi River, a Hardy Trust. It's a home that takes in boys, gives them a new lease on life and educates them and feeds them. And because I'd been clean for a while now, I was helping them through that stage, because the earliest stages of getting clean are the hardest. It's the easiest point to relapse.
Right.
So I was helping with that, and three guys had this incredible idea on insurance. And I was like, hey, sounds like a good idea. I had no idea what this world even was, you know. I knew very few people who were insured. You know, life was...
How old were you at this time?
I mean, some time had passed. So I was 21 by this stage. And yeah, so we were going around asking different insurance companies whether we had a chance with this and whatnot, going to different receptionists all over the place, and always being told, email this or call this, and then you wait months. So it became our job to try and make this work, and that's what we did.
Okay, there's a question here.
Kids came up to me with an insurance idea for bus travel. And it was to insure people who were on long distance buses. And this was the first business that anyone had ever pitched to me. And to this day, I don't know why they even shared it with me, because I didn't have very much money. I wasn't good looking or anything like that, or very well put together. But they shared it, and I did what everyone else should do. I went online and I found info at email addresses, and I spammed insurance companies. Info at Jubilee or Canon or UAP or whatever it is, and then you start becoming creative. So what could the CEO's email address be? bob.colimo@ or whatever it is. You start doing it, you start changing email addresses, you keep spamming in the hope that someone will reply. I think this is where a lot of people get lost, because we waited 6 months before we got a reply. 6 months. Now, most people will tweet once or tweet 3 times and then say you're arrogant and you're not replying, or they'll send a couple of emails and then they'll give up. You need to be hungry for that success, right? And you need to be in it for the long haul.
All this to say, HESHAN definitely had a savior complex, whereby he consistently positioned himself as the indispensable solution to Kenyan startups' problems. Another big lie that HESHAN told was the number of businesses he had invested in. In some interviews, he talked about investing in between 22,000 to 24,000 businesses, and in other interviews, 17,000 businesses.
The Silva Group, at the moment, you are financing about 24,000 businesses?
Well, we did 17,000 last year, in all the regions that we operate in, and this isn't Kenya only. This year, we're doing around 86 every single day, which is incredible. You know, the whole mandate behind what we do is to reduce poverty in this country from 60% down to 40%. Within 10 years.
For starters, the discrepancy in numbers is a red flag. One thing that an investor always knows is how many businesses they have invested in. Another red flag is the fact that he could not provide the names of these businesses, not even one. Thirdly, and most importantly, it's impossible for a VC or a private equity firm to invest in those many businesses in 1 year. This is because investing in businesses is a very structured process that takes time. Even the most nimble organizations can take at least 3 months to put out a call for proposals, review proposals, meet applicants to understand their businesses, make an investment decision, and conduct due diligence, all before signing on the dotted line. On top of that, HESHAN was essentially a one-man show at his company. He never mentioned having a team, and there was no evidence that he had staff to scout businesses, review applications, or manage investments. Another part of HESHAN's story that simply doesn't hold water, not even a single drop, is his claim that 3 Kenyan startups he invested in crossed the $10 million valuation mark. Startups that reach valuations that high do not stay hidden. You will definitely know when a Kenyan startup crosses the $10 million valuation mark. As usual, you notice that HESHAN never mentions the names of these startups. Classic HESHAN behavior, by the way. He would drop impressive sounding numbers designed to make journalists and the public go wow, but he always avoided specifics. As we were putting together this story, we were curious, why did HESHAN lie so much, and what did he get out of it? What was his big payoff for telling these lies? Of course, he was getting publicity out of it, tons of publicity. Additionally, he was making some money with the HESH stocks, but this return on investment did not seem commensurate with the shenanigans he was doing. This sent us down a rabbit hole, chasing a rabbit of HESHAN's long con, trying to establish what HESHAN was really getting out of all this. In the process of chasing the rabbit down the rabbit hole, we reached out to someone who knew HESHAN. The person, who is a very credible source, told us that HESHAN allegedly conned an investor a very large sum of money under the pretense that he would invest it on the investor's behalf in Kenyan businesses. There you have it. HESHAN getting money from investors appears to be his real payoff for all the lies. The story of HESHAN's dealings in this case is quite heartbreaking, but we cannot get into the details since this person who spoke to us chose to speak off the record. It does, however, show that in as much as there might be fascination, curiosity, and even giggles that come with how con artists such as HESHAN operate with so much audacity, shamelessness, and delusion, there are real victims behind their scams whose lives are negatively impacted by their actions. After Glasshouse dropped HESHAN as a client and he was exposed as a fraud, he tweeted a press release of his own, saying, "Since I became known in the public space 2 years ago, I've despised it. Nobody cared about the 7 years it took for me to get to where I was prior to the last 2 years. 7 years of anonymous growth. I never thought a decision like a public relations team being changed would be gossip for so many people. I will not be dragged into slamming anyone to come out on top. That has never and will never be me. Going forward, there will be no more interviews, radio, TV, or print. No more Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. I will disappear from your lives, just the way I was when none of you knew who I was. I crave anonymity, to be out of the spotlight, more than anything. And I never want to be defined by a number, millionaire, billionaire. Those who know me know how much I hate it. Or a job title. It's such an empty life. We all go to the grave with nothing. I'll spend my remaining time trying to help those who want it. Screw money, never for headlines or tweets or likes, but to be a person who lives for more than just a company or self. To those who are struggling with depression, financially or otherwise, know the journey is rough. People will tear you down the whole way. Be strong. Your life is your own. See you when I see you." HESHAN also gave one final interview to Larry Madowo, where he attempted to clear the air and salvage his reputation. We are highlighting HESHAN's answers to Larry's questions because they show him for what he is. Someone who isn't remorseful, avoids taking accountability, and is fluent in vagueness and word salads. The interview was published on Larry's website, which has since been taken down, but you can access it with the Wayback Machine. In it, HESHAN responded to 10 questions. We won't go through them one by one. Instead, we'll highlight the key themes that emerged. Firstly, on his fallout with Glasshouse, HESHAN implied that they parted ways because there were issues with their working relationship. He said in part, many different issues built up over time. It became very difficult to work together and we decided to go our separate ways. from the overall management of our monthly talk shows to the posts that were being put up on my social media, they weren't the look we were going for. He also cited it was a matter that should have been handled privately and things were blown out of proportion. To be clear, Glasshouse has glowing reviews. They helped HESHAN gain massive visibility, getting him on TV, radio, blogs and newspapers, designing and implementing hashtags, and even pitching to Nation FM for him to have his own investment show. They did their job. It was HESHAN's lies that ultimately led to the end of their working relationship. Speaking of the investment show, when Larry asked HESHAN why it fell through, HESHAN claimed he didn't complete the due diligence because he wasn't paid. According to him, if he had been compensated, he could have completed the due diligence. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the answer that HESHAN gave on why the investment show did not go through. On his wealth status, his business, and on the question whether he's a billionaire, HESHAN said verbatim, "In the words of Eric Omondi, if you sold everything I have, everything, then maybe. You've been to my home, Larry. I do okay. I'll never be defined by a number. For all I care, people can write me off as a thousandaire. I'll never live for the approval of people, flash wealth in front of them for their approval." On how he made his billions, HESHAN did not mention the insurance startup in this interview. Instead, he reverted to his original story of being a tea exporter to Egypt, claiming the revolution disrupted both the business and its acquisition by Unilever. He was essentially claiming that the revolution in Egypt was the reason why his deal with Unilever had fell through. When Larry asked him about the 17,000 businesses he claims to have invested in, HESHAN responded verbatim, "This is a big misconception with our business. We have two arms. One that invests in up to 10 businesses a year, like a typical VC. On the other hand, we supported a number of social causes, kiosks, mamambogas, businesses that we will not make a cent from. The average cost of setting up one of them is 2,500 Kenyan shillings. To put them in the same bracket as an actual business does not make sense." The final question Larry asked HESHAN was, "What's your message to all those saying you are fake?" Again, we quote for you his answer verbatim. "What is a fake? At 26, I can manage the rest of my life without having to work again. That is a blessing. So if the main gripe people have with me is if I'm a millionaire or billionaire, I want to politely tell those people that there is more to life than that. We have 22 million people in Kenya living under 10,000 Kenyan shillings a month. I'm going to spend the rest of my time on this planet trying to better that. Not for headlines or tweets, but because that's worth more to me than a wealth list or what car I'm known to be driving." It goes without saying, but it needs to be said, that is such an exhausting word salad. What is he even saying? Anyways, once again, HESHAN's statement and his final interview with Larry Madowo reveal that he consistently fails to take full responsibility of his actions. He is essentially gaslighting the public and shows someone caught in a lie and is dodging taking responsibility for his actions. This entire debacle could have been resolved if he had provided proof of his businesses, his wealth, or the companies he claimed to have invested in. Instead, he chose to avoid accountability. After HESHAN was exposed as a con, he took a break from social media and even returned to Sri Lanka at some point. It's worth noting that we came across an article published by Lanka E-News, a Sri Lankan online news site known for critical and investigative reporting. This article was published on 13 December 2015. The article alleged that HESHAN De Silva had been appointed as a director at Mobitel, a leading state-owned telecommunications company in Sri Lanka. The article went on to allege that his appointment was politically motivated and lacked merit. as he replaced a director who had opposed corrupt practices within the company. The article further claims that HESHAN had previously been a manager under the said director, and his sudden promotion raised questions including why would someone with no relevant experience and who had been publicly exposed in Kenya as a fake billionaire be given such a role. The article alleges that HESHAN's position was intended to maintain corrupt activities in the company. The article also alleges that HESHAN was doing money laundering for the Rajapakses, a prominent political family in Sri Lanka. High-ranking members of this family include Mahinda Rajapaksa, former president of Sri Lanka from 2005 to 2015, and later Prime Minister from 2019 to 2022. HESHAN's proximity to political power in Sri Lanka is not a reach. We were able to establish that someone in his nuclear family, very, very close to him, worked as an advisor to the Sri Lankan Prime Minister between 2016 and 2019, and later the president between 2023 and 2024. We reached out to Lanka E-News seeking clarity on these allegations their article made against HESHAN. We reached out to them on 13th November 2025, but we did not hear back. Therefore, these allegations made by Lanka E-News against HESHAN remain unverified. So where is HESHAN now? From his Instagram page, which he has since converted into a Sri Lankan news sharing platform, it seems HESHAN is based in Sri Lanka, where he also works as an influencer. As we wrap up this episode, we are left with one big question. Could HESHAN have gotten away with the lies he told for so long because of how he looked? It's hard to ignore the role his identity may have played in how easily the public and the media believed him. Thank you for joining us today. If you made it this far, we hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up, like, share, or comment. It really goes a long way in helping us keep the lights on. In the meantime, remember, anyone can be a scammer and anyone can be scammed. So please take care, stay safe, and always trust your gut.